Good morning. This is Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District update. It's been a while since I got a chance to visit with you listeners out there. And today I'd like to talk about saving some money. We all know it's a little tough out there, and there are ways that we can save. And I'm going to talk a little bit about things you can do, 5 tips for cutting phosphorus and potassium fertilizer cost. Now, this information has been provided by Dan Kaiser. He's with the University of Minnesota. He's the Extension Soil Fertility Specialist, and he's come up with 5 ways that you can cut your fertilizer cost. Fertilizer represents a major cost in cropping systems, and over-application of nutrients can lead to decreased profitability and also downstream impacts if that soil and fertilizer moves off your fields. In 2018, 20% most profitable farms made $24 an acre more than the 20% least profitable farms on rented land, and $21 more on their own ground, according to some data at the University of Minnesota. So just looking at the 5 tips, starting with number 1. Soil tests give you the likelihood that a crop will respond to a nutrient. Soil test results for phosphorus and potassium are indexes of nutrient availability for crops. This index represents the probability that a nutrient is needed. The soil test classification indicates how likely the soil can supply all nutrients the crop needs. A high soil test value suggests that it is unlikely that fertilizer application is needed. Point number 2. Short-term reductions in the application rates of phosphorus and potassium do not result in a rapid depletion of nutrients. Many farmers worry that soil test levels will plummet if fertilizer is not applied. While a reduction in soil test levels over time is expected, as nutrients are removed from the field, the rate of depletion is slow, even with no fertilizer application. University of Minnesota research has consistently found that applying 2/3 to 1/2 of the expected removal of phosphorus or potassium can maintain soil test volumes in the medium to high classifications without risking a reduction in yield. 3. Use variable rate technology to its full advantage. Optimal use of variable rate fertilizer application can help to more precisely, but that's a tough word to say. It must be all the heat. Apply nutrients where needed. Increasing profitability using variable rate applications depends on 1. Better addressing under-fertilized areas of the field, potentially increasing yield, and 2. Reducing cost in areas of the field where profitability of a yield response to fertilizer is low. If possible, it is best to target a soil test value that you can build up or draw down to where there is an agronomic advantage to applying fertilizer. Point number 4, consider application timing. Fertilizer applications made at one time for multiple cropping seasons can be enough to maximize yield. However, keep in mind application timing. A 10-year study in Minnesota studying phosphorus using 2-year corn soybean rotation found a 4 bushel per acre yield advantage for corn when all or a portion of the phosphorus fertilizer was applied ahead of the corn. Yet soybean yields were not affected by phosphorus application timing. For potassium, corn grain yield was not impacted by time of application. However, soybean grain yield was 1 to 2 bushels per acre greater when potassium was applied ahead of corn. We can conclude from the research that application of phosphorus and potassium of corn is good practice, and assuming that proper rate is applied will result in maximum productivity. And then the final point that Dr. Kaiser shares with us is it's always a good time to consider taking soil samples to assess nutrient availability. Remember that the likelihood of a crop response to phosphorus is very low when the Bray P1 soil test is 20 parts per million or the Olson soil test is 15 parts per million or greater. For potassium, the likelihood a crop will need K or potassium is very low when the soil test is 200 part per million or greater. Understanding these values can help you decide whether and where fertilizer is needed and where costs can be reduced. If there is a concern about yield reductions in high or very high soil test levels, small rates of starter fertilizer can be effective at reducing the chance of a yield reduction. Only a small amount of nutrients is needed when the soil can supply a large portion of what the crop demands. And one thing here in Stearns County, in greater central Minnesota, we do have a lot of livestock, and it has been our observation that many of our fields are quite high with phosphorus, and this would just be a great opportunity to save some money if you're looking at keeping these financial outlays to a minimum. And that's today's update from the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Dennis Fuchs here. Have a great week and stay cool.